Good afternoon, and welcome to this meeting of the Peterborough and Cambridgeshire Police and Crime Panel. Just a reminder for those present, the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and we welcome those who are watching at home. Can I remind all those present, please, to turn their devices to silent or switched off if possible. And we would like to welcome the Commissioner and officers from his office and thank them for their attendance today. Good afternoon. So we'll move swiftly to agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Pippa, do we have any apologies?
Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Leaming.
Thank you very much. Item number 2, declaration of interest. Does any member present have a declaration of interest? Please could you indicate by raising your hand if you do? No declarations. Thank you, Pippa. Item number 3, then, the minutes of the previous meeting. In advance of any other comment, we've been made aware of a couple of typos in the meeting set of minutes and the repeat of names in the confirmation hearing set of minutes. This will be corrected before I sign. Our members agreed that the minutes of both the confirmation hearing and the meeting are accurate, apart from those issues already raised.
May. I didn't attend the last meeting, but you've got me as attending.
Oh, thank you very much. We will address that.
I was at the last meeting, and I don't think I'm to be on here.
You were, because I think you sat. Well, you certainly at the confirmation hearing because you sat next to me.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
No, you weren't. Okay. Yes, Councillor Whelan. Sorry, Wigan.
My name is spelled incorrectly as well.
Okay.
That is the typo, yes.
And
Thank you.
Yeah.
You spelled your own name incorrectly. Oh, didn't notice. It's okay. Auto-corrected having been spelled. We've got those. So aside from the typos, any other issues? Perfect. Okay, item number 4 then, questions or statements from members of the public. Pippa, have we received any questions or statements for this meeting? Thank you. Item number 5 then, review of actions or recommendations from the previous meeting. Commissioner, is there anything you would like to update the panel on from the last meeting?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, panel. As per usual, there are a number of soft actions which she said, or my team and I said we would take away. We have done that. Councillor Leaming asked a couple of questions, one around quad and trail bikes and police legislation enforcement. We have updated her. I also visited at her request Orchard Park, just north of Cambridge, and spoke to local traders and councillors in relation to some of the issues there. There was a question about working arrangements and partnership working with probation, and we managed to put Councillor Leaming in touch with the appropriate authority at the probation service. There was another question asked in relation to further financing of Operation Dante hotspot, ASB hotspot funding. The reality is we don't know. We'll have to wait for the comprehensive spending review and any allocations from Home Office. There was a question in relation to hate crime. Councillor Whelan, I believe my office has updated you personally. Marcus Bennetti asked some questions around the knife crime data. We have sought some clarity from the force. Although there is an increase in crime, it's actually quite a small number of offences. It's around 70 offences, which in itself is not insignificant. But as I think I mentioned at the meeting, there is a significant reduction in hospital admissions, which is probably the best data to go with, given that a lot of people don't report to police. And I know that haven't been in policing yourself. Sometimes the data doesn't actually tell us the picture. Quite often drugs and knife crime offences is because the police have actually done a good job and gone out and found them as opposed to reports. And then there was another question around firearms licensing. Some colleagues may or may not be aware, Cambridge has been shockingly bad at issuing and dealing with firearms licenses. I have held the Chief Constable to account. I'm pleased to announce that my temporary Chief Constable has just put 6 people into trying sorting out Cambridgeshire only, because it's a collaborated function with Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire, but they put 6 people in there to try and get through the backlogs as soon as possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We'll now move on then to the formal agenda items, and the first one of those is a deep dive into the pillar around early intervention and prevention. Commissioner, would you like to present this item?
All over it again. Do I have to start from the beginning? No, okay. Yeah, so he said the real success of policing, and I would actually add now, obviously, the partnerships around policing, is the absence of crime. And I think that's what we would all agree, is that prevention is better than the cure. And we don't want to be dealing with victims. We don't want people to be victims of crime. I'm also clear that crime prevention is at the core of policing. But let me be clear, policing will never be able to deal with this on its own. In fact, there is no single crime type, no issue that the police can arrest their way out of. So the paper sets out some of the context for the local partnership landscape, and I do believe here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough we do have some excellent partnerships. I also have infrastructure in place to provide leadership within the system. So I chair the Criminal Justice Board that brings together all the statutory partners in the criminal justice system. That's held regularly, and I was very clear. I wanted it to be a doing board, not just a listening board. I think it goes on later in the paper. I have powers in relation to policing, in relation to holding policing to account. I don't hold the Crown Prosecution Service, the courts or probation to account, but I do have powers to convene, and it's about relationships. And I think we have pretty strong relationships across our partnerships. I also chair the High Harms Board. I've spoken around this before. This is part of a statutory responsibility, and it's around community safety partnerships, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But this is the strategic board that oversees that. And I think, once again, it's a doing board where we come together and try and, where there have been difficulties, try and solve those. But it's well attended. In fact, we've got one, I think, this coming week, tomorrow. And it brings together all the key partners. Some highlights that I would like to pick out is around the preventative interventions to prevent young people from being drawn into crime through serious violence. And our first ever event that we held in the county around preventing violence against women and girls, which was extremely well attended. Before I move on, when I talk about preventing crime, of course, we all know that there's many types of prevention, whether that target hardening, putting locks on our houses and cars, whether it's rehabilitating offenders, whether it's dealing with those habitual criminals. And all of it's important. All of it is truly important. But I make no apology for being an absolute advocate for early intervention, our young people. And the reason I say that is that it just makes common sense, not only with my policing background. I started off my career as most police do, being response, chasing burglars and this sort of thing, but ended up in child abuse investigations, child protection, vulnerable people. You're seeing the same people. Your burglars were often on child protection plans, etc. And actually, not if we concentrate our efforts there, not only are we good for those young people, it keeps them out of the criminal justice system, which we'd all agree that's what we want. It's good for the public because they're not committing crimes against you. And furthermore, it's better for the economy, because putting these people through the criminal justice system is costing us an absolute fortune. Another area is a new prevention fund, which we've launched to provide small grants to our community safety partnerships, local charities and community organisations in relation to prevention of crime, specifically prevention of crime. Constabulary prevention enforcement, they have a prevention strategy. This includes hotspot policing, tackling serious and organised crime, and there's some more detail about that in the paper, and I will move on to that. And finally, looking ahead, the paper references some of the government initiatives that are being piloted in other areas of the country before they're being rolled out nationally. Community safety partnerships. We've spoken about those before. This is a statutory responsibility for local authorities, and it does have statutory partners, policing being one of them. I made this a priority when I first got elected just over 4 years ago, on the principle that community safety partnerships across the country, I think the performance is variable. That's probably a kind way of saying that in some areas they really don't work, in some areas they do work. Now, I'm not going to comment on where we were 4 years ago, but it did dawn on me that it's not, it's actually try and encourage people who have other day jobs to come together and do some good work. Doesn't just need words, it needs some resource behind it as well. So I committed then and committed on re-election to providing funding, quite substantial funding to our community safety partnerships. And this is really about a problem solving person, a person to actually do the work and it be their day job. And we've had some fantastic success. Took a little while for all the local authorities to come on board, but they did. And now they're all sharing best practice, working together in a really good way. And it's providing some real significant outcomes. Preventative interventions, what we've received, or nearly £600,000 worth of Home Office serious violence funding. We've been awarded those in this financial year, and I've allocated this funding to statutory partners to prevent serious violence. Colleagues will be aware that there is now a statutory duty upon agencies to prevent serious violence. There's been a range of interventions, particularly focused once again on preventing young people from being drawn into crime. It won't be lost on particularly those elected members around the table. I mean, quite often it's our communities, quite rightly, they want to see the police, they want them to turn up, they want to deal with antisocial behaviour, they want to deal with drugs, etc. And so do I. But they're not always the best people to do it. And we've actually had detached youth workers from Romsey Mill in Cambridge and elsewhere going out with the police and also being, going out into those communities. And we have seen some fantastic results. They're actually engaging with young people, stopping them from actually continuing with these sorts of behaviours. And some of this work has been recognised nationally. Here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, there has been some fantastic work by the partnership. And I say by the partnership, I support it. We've got some brilliant officers, some brilliant people on the ground following this through, and I'll talk about the Fenham one in a moment. Preventing violence against women and girls. So we hosted this event back in March. It was really well attended. Some really good discussions in the room, and we took away some sort of actions or some areas that we wanted to really concentrate. Just a couple of other areas around this. There is the Safer Corridors Toolkit for schools. So this is some funding that's gone into updating that, refreshing that. And this is aimed at trying to deal with unwanted sexual behaviours, sexual harassment, etc. in schools. And once again, this isn't telling young girls what to do. This is about telling young boys what to do, and I'm very clear on that as well. So we've got a new prevention fund as well. Now, these are small grants of up to £5,000. The community safety partnerships can bid into these along with local charities and community organisations to prevent crime. I always continue to fund the Chivalry Trust. This is the Bobby scheme. If anyone hasn't heard of this, they're a fantastic organisation. They really are. They deal with victims of crime. They don't just do prevention and security, that sort of thing. And many of them are really subject matter experts on things like fraud. So they're giving some real advice. They're like another police service to me, really. So they do some really good work. And funding to projects such as the Phoenix Youth Provision to proactively work with children and young people in Whittlesea. Just an example of working with young people. So the constabulary prevention and enforcement, building on last year's funding, the constabulary has again received an additional £1 million for additional hotspot patrols, and this included initiatives such as the joint patrols with youth workers and others. And I was clear, I mean, it's great, want to see the police, send them to hotspot policing, but it's not going to solve the problem on its own. So I think you can see lots of activities being highlighted in that report and the constabulary's social media as well. I think this funding added up to around 932 days of additional patrols, but once again, it wasn't all spent on additional patrols. When it comes to the next agenda item, there's more detail on some of those things that I've mentioned, but Chair, I'll stop there, and if there's any questions, I'm very happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Do we have some questions? Councillor Bradnam?
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for your report and for your presentation. It's gratifying to see how the money that you're getting is being spent in a very purposeful way. I've got a couple of points I wanted to raise, if I may. So on page 4.5, paragraph 4.5 on page 12, you're talking about community safety partnerships. And indeed, these are the one that I interact with is South Cambs and the South Cambridgeshire Community Safety Partnership, and I know that the officers at South Cambs District Council who coordinate that group are working really hard on a number of projects. What we have found and been slightly disappointed by is that having done a lot of work on something in the Community Safety Partnership and then identified that we need action from the police, we're getting less engagement from the police than we could wish. And I know the officers involved with that have been trying to get traction from the police, and that's been quite slow. So one thing I will just raise with you on that is I think there is an order being planned for example, the Milton Park and Ride, but that is taking some time, and I'm not quite sure why it's taking some time. It's the order that means that once people have been identified, it's easier to take action against them another time. So I just wondered if there's any update on that, and I'm quite happy to have that separately if you want to. But are you sure that the constabulary are picking up on the things that are coming out of this community safety partnership? I think I'll stop there if you want to respond to that one.
On the matter of the individual issue that you raised, we'll take that away, get an update for you. The whole point here is that the community safety partnerships are made up by the statutory partners, the police being one of them and being probably the most significant partner. So I would expect them to be fully engaged. I have regular meetings with the constabulary and the lead for that. I'm happy to take this offline, but I do have in my office an officer who works very closely with the community safety partnership. So I will go and ask the question, are there any issues in South Cambridgeshire? They haven't been brought to my attention. Certainly the chair of the CSP hasn't brought them to my attention, but if there are, then
Okay.
we'll go around and have a look.
Right. Thank you. I'll perhaps try and find some extra information to direct more directly. The other one was on paragraph 5.7 on page 20. The report talks about the domestic abuse related death reviews, and I'm very glad that people are doing those. I appreciate it is so important to understand what has happened that has ended up with a death. And you know, I'm sad to see, but not surprised to see that the county has got 16 reviews ongoing, and I just wondered if is that different to the homicide reviews that we used to do? This is specifically to do with domestic abuse. Wondered if you could talk to us a little bit about what goes on there.
They are the same as the reason they're called domestic abuse related death is unfortunately, this isn't just about homicide, suicide. And so it's capturing that as well, quite importantly, and something I completely support. I thought you were going to ask about funding there, but you didn't, so I'm not going to answer that question.
Question
Okay,
waiting.
well, let me deal with
So you
that
can
now.
answer that if
We
it's waiting.
raised that nationally. We made the case. It's not going to happen. I don't believe so. If you think, as in, we're going to get extra money to do these, given our current financial climate, I mean, there's been a lot of initiatives, and this is the political point, a lot of initiatives that we'd all agree with, like safer town centres, etc. There has been no funding coming to assist us with that. And I think we've got to accept that that funding envelope is very tight. Doesn't mean that we won't keep trying. But to be honest with you, the whole issue of funding, which I'll come on to, is significant.
For responding to my third question, the telepathic, because I've raised it a number of times before. But what I think maybe my concern is that I would want to be reassured that the manner we have, the way we have of gathering funding in order to fund these reviews is sufficient to cover the work that's needed, because it's so important that we understand what was the cause, what were the things leading up to it, and were there any interventions that could have prevented the death. So it's really important that those reviews are done. And I know you know that, but are you confident that the way in which we gather the monies in is adequate for the job?
I've got Nikki here as a bit of an expert on this, but I am confident in respect of that every time we are required to do one, we are doing one. And we are paying for it. I mean, obviously, the arrangements at the moment is that all the authorities are putting money in. Clearly, if it comes to a case where the pot empties, we need to have some conversations across the partnership. But I think we all recognise the significance and the importance of this, and it's a statutory function. So I'm sure, I'm confident that they will get done.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Wigan?
Thank you, Chair. I thank the Commissioner for his report and introduction. On section 5.5, as has already been mentioned about the crime and disorder hotspots and the funding that is very welcome to support that. I just wanted some assurance that the additional resource going into hotspots is dealing with and deterring the problems rather than just moving it elsewhere, for instance, away from Peterborough city centre into the suburbs.
Yeah, I completely agree. There is no point in just moving the problem on, which is why, and hopefully you'll get the reassurance, not only are the police carrying out initiatives with younger people and engagement with them and families and schools, etc., but just, for example, deploying youth workers with the police. You know, that's the bit for me that will stop this rather than just moving it on. So, you know, as best we can, there's always more that can be done. Always more that can be done. But I'm reassured that the constabulary and partners are effectively dealing with this, or effectively dealing with that sum of money that we got to deal with tackling hotspot ASB areas.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Warren?
Afternoon, Commissioner. I do welcome the section about rehabilitating prisoners in those situations, because I know that's been a real serious concern about getting those prisoners not just to go back into crimes. And I just want to kind of flesh out some more of those details about what that likes with the work that you're doing with the job centre, how successful is that programme that you're getting people not to recommit those crimes, and the work you're doing with local employment in Peterborough and in Cambridgeshire about getting more prisoners not rehabilitated into the systems and not committing those crimes again.
Thank you, Councillor. I think there's two strands to this when it comes to prisoners of ex-offenders. We obviously, what we do know with people coming out of prison is that, you know, there's sort of couple of areas, 2 or 3 areas that you need to deal with. And firstly, it's housing. Then it's sort of employment, and then a host of other things. But those sort of areas. Where I won't mention the Criminal Justice Board that I chair. We monitor these figures at that board, and they're obviously monitored elsewhere quite intensively. In fact, this takes up a large portion of the agenda, people coming out of prison. I would say it's got more complex. You'll be aware that the prison estate is, well, broken, to say the least. And what therefore happens is that people are being moved around the country. Where we used to have a stable, and generally it is Peterborough Prison, which is a remand and custody prison, a stable population of people from around the local area. It's not like that now. That causes difficulties and challenges for the partners because people are being released from other parts of the country. So we can get our house in order as best we can, but we are reliant on other areas as well. So that's one element of it as well. I go on to mention, I don't think I did mention actually, that I'm also the senior responsible officer for drug strategy in this county. That's quite unusual. Normally it's Director of Public Health, but I do take a direct interest in this and I actually monitor it quite closely. And what I am assured about is that everybody who should or requires or needs rehabilitation support, medical support particularly, that's in place as well. And then there's some more of the sort of, as you just mentioned there, some of the other work that we do with Peterborough Prison. We've worked in there, we funded some initiatives in there and outside links and places like that. I might just ask, Christina, is there anything that you want to add? Christina looks after that part of the policy area.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to add to that. So what's really great to see, in line with what Darryl said about partners coming forward into this space, is it's a priority of lots of the important partners in this space at the moment, which is fantastic. So you can see there around Job Centre Plus and the prison and probation and other partners. And we've done some work facilitating some of those conversations recently so that they can be sharing some of those initiatives. And they've done some mapping of some of the pathways where it becomes complicated, how all of the services fit together. And that's meant that they can build in some improvements around particularly some of the processes around remand cases because of the delays in the criminal justice system where people are being held on remand longer and maybe released straight from court, so that the processes are in place for them, not just people who finished a sentence. And also supporting more links with the work of the Combined Authority as well, and their work around skills and employment, and particularly their programmes like Connect to Work, which are targeted at people who are finding it more challenging to get into the employment space. And that's been really good to see. And Peterborough Prison have been grasping this work as well. And it's mentioned in there, they've had some really innovative work where they've set up a construction hub within the prison. And if you've not seen any of that online, it's worth having a look. They've literally set up where they can do bricklaying skills, and they started in the female part of the prison and moving into the male, and they've had success with getting people into employment when they leave as well, which is really great to see.
Councillor Tom. Oh, sorry, my apologies.
So yeah, really good to see that kind of work, but also what kind of work, because there's obviously some prisoner rehabilitation charities that are based in Peterborough, UK. What kind of partnerships, what kind of feelers have you got with those charities that are also supporting prisoners that are getting rehabilitated? Are there any work or support work? Because I don't see it mentioning with the charities that are supporting prisoners with that rehabilitation.
Yeah.
We do work with charities. So what we'll do is we'll come back to you. But I mean, Outside Links is a good example. We've worked with those, and we've worked with Peterborough United community, the community part of that, who delivered some really good initiative or coaching actually for women prisoners. So there's been a number. I suppose the point I would also make around this is that when commissioning, there are many good, great charities out there. And a lot of these requests come across my desk, and I've got to make decisions, and that's pretty tough. There's only so much money. Ultimately, if I put any more money in, that's money coming away from policing, and I won't do that. So it's a limited budget. What I can say is that we work very closely with probation. The point I'm making there is that it's all well and good me commissioning charities and them commissioning charities. We need to work together to see what the issues are and commission together. And I'm pleased to say we do have a good relationship with probation to do just that.
Thank you, Councillor Tongan and Councillor Bradnam.
Hello. So firstly, I think it is really important to do this preventative work and make sure crime isn't happening in the first place. That is the sole goal, is to protect people and keep people safe. I wanted to comment on something on page 19. Firstly, I just wanted to flag a point which I think I made at the previous main panel meeting, excluding the Chief Constable related meeting, which is to do with how we're presenting information and trying to draw links. It may have been over this exact same sentence. I think it might have been copied from the last report we read. But I don't think it's always helpful to try and explicitly say that, for example, in this case, 7,000 hours of visible policing has resulted in a 50% reduction in antisocial behaviour, because we haven't done anything substantial to actually prove something causative there. There are many factors, and we know it was one of the many factors that led to this, not necessarily the visible policing. So in future, I think it is better to be a bit more honest about that fact. And I think we can talk about our achievements and without drawing the link that explicitly. To go back to the thing I actually really wanted to ask about, it was to do with the 215 extra stop and searches, which is mentioned just below that section. I think we really need to be outcome focused and ask what my question, sorry to be blunt, is what did those extra 215 stop and searches achieve? What was the result of that? Because unless we saw some actual results, we are effectively just harassing random people in the streets. I think we need to note what we are achieving by doing these things, not just that we did them.
Happy to get the detail on that. I mean, I've got a pretty good overall picture of stop and search and what the results are. I would probably, firstly, I'll take your point. But, this is a report, it's a public facing report, but I do take your point. It's clearly not just policing, and I agree with you there. Whether we change it or not is another matter, but I take your point entirely. I probably, so when it comes to stop and search, firstly, let me be clear. I am a big supporter of stop and search as a preventative tool, not just one to catch criminals, but as a preventative tool. And there's a bit of a problem here when you start looking at the data, because if the data is showing you that 100% of people who have been stopped, we found something on them, the police have found something, I think there's something wrong with that, because then the deterrent factor is not there. I don't know what the good figure is, but I don't think it's 100%. And I know you said it. I know your style. That police randomly out there harassing people. Let me tell you, I joined the police over 35 years ago. Powers to stop and search were the same then. There were many, 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 many more stop and searches carried out then. Now there are very few stop and searches carried out. Very few. If you can go on the national website, police.co, will get it out to you. You can put in your own specific area and it will tell you how many stop and searches have been done. Sometimes I am quite staggered how few stop and searches are done, to be honest with you. And I completely get when they are done, they've got to be done proportionally, legally, when necessary. And officers should use all those skills that they have, to explain to people why it's being done. So absolutely to be done lawfully. As I say, I do know what the figures are. They were actually reasonably high about the amount of people who are stopped and then something is found. Sometimes that concerns me. I sometimes wonder if they're using that power enough and whether police officers nowadays are actually sometimes frightened to use those powers. Well, they are. I know they are because I've spoken to them. They're frightened of using those powers because they might get a complaint that might, put them in some sort of jeopardy. I'm very clear with the Chief Constable, and along with the Chief Constable coming in as well, I'll be very clear. that police officers should use all the powers that they have as long as they are done legitimately, lawfully, necessary, proportionately. In relation to your question, I actually don't know the answer on those specifics. I will seek an answer from the constabulary.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just coming to the actual force of people who are working in the constabulary. Back on page 33, you've referred to the retention of skilled staff. And I know a little while ago you had an upsurge in the numbers of officers that you had, and that caused a sort of a slight problem because of the amount of training and the number of the amount of uniforms and equipment and cars you needed to have to support those staff. And we know that recruitment is expensive and costly and it takes time and you want people to be experienced. So retention is really important. And I wanted to know whether you felt that this internal mobile app, which is offering health and welfare advice, is it being accessed? And slightly, I have highlighted in my notes, staff who become victims can access support from 36 new welfare officers, which is brilliant. But I just wanted to check whether you felt this sort of, so the first thing is, are people accessing it and using it? And are they contacting the welfare support officers? And is that having the effect of improving retention of staff in the constabulary?
So the app itself is brand new, so we haven't been able to evaluate it yet. So, but clearly, that'd be something I'll be very keen that they're forced to evaluate. It's an area that's really important to me. Policing is about people. It's people, and if you don't look after your people and keep them in the best possible place, then policing fails. So, in relation to retention, I don't have the latest figures, but certainly the last conversation I had with the Chief Constable, I think Cambridgeshire is actually one of the best in the country at retaining police officers, which is really good. And policing overall is pretty good at retention compared to other public sectors, quite honestly. The issue here in Cambridgeshire is that I'm also informed we have plenty of people applying to join the police. In fact, there's waiting lists. That's not the same with every police force in the country, particularly those large metropolitan ones that want to take over with the smaller ones. Probably should be thinking inwardly there and sorting themselves out first, but there you go. So, you know, we're obviously, the Chief Constable is obviously doing something right, and the new Chief Constable, I will be holding to account to do exactly the same thing. Just on this point now, I mean, this is a public meeting. Despite our high retention rates and people wanting to come to join, our officers are unfairly treated in relation to pay and conditions. And that's something we cannot control. The Chief can't control, I can't control. That needs a central government to deal with. Officers in Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire get paid more. And that can't be right in a collaboration. And it can't be right because, particularly in the south of Cambridgeshire, it's cost as much to live there as it does in London.
Yes. And it's due to, as it were, a London waiting for Hertfordshire. You're back on. Yeah. Can you do you have how many officers? Because I appreciate it's not just constables; it's the whole staff. What is the force? Sorry, I should ask that more sensibly. Do you happen to know off the top of your head how many constables we have now?
I think the official figure, and it actually changes every day because people retire, people coming in. But I think we're still at about 1,732. Under the neighbourhood policing pledge, there are, I think it's about 30 more being recruited or coming through the system. So that should, by simple maths, around 1,750 or so full-time police officers.
Much. I think the other thing is that the nature of the work is changing with so much online data. There's an enormous amount of work or evidence that you have. It just takes so much longer to deal with it, doesn't it? It's because it's a whole wealth of everybody's phone and all of that. So it's complicated. But thank you very much for your answers.
I mean, Chair, if I can come back on that, I mean, that's absolutely the case. And a point I was going to make here is that, successive governments have provided some money to get additional police officers, which is brilliant, great. I'm never going to say no to that, and nor would any of us. But actually, if I was to ask the Chief Constable, what do you really need? It might not be frontline warranted police officers. Um, I would prefer governments, whatever colour they are, to turn around and say, this is a priority. We want you to go and tackle violence against women and girls, and here's the money to do it. And let the experts, chief constables and local partnerships work out how best to spend that money.
Thank you. Councillor Elam.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just on the back of the work with the young people and the police cadets, how many of those tend to go on to join in the police force, or is it just a way of just doing other things? Do you know what I mean?
So, as an ex-police cadet of 1984, when it was very different then, it was basically like regimental marching and drill and all that sort of thing. You automatically went into the police. These days, our police cadets very, very, very different. This is more akin possibly to, military cadets or scouting or something like that. This is providing opportunities for them to do many different things, but also, have those links to policing. I don't have the number, but I know we have had people come from the cadets and gone into the police, which is fantastic. But for me, that's not what this is about. This is about, doing stuff with our young people. I do also know that, this isn't just good kids from good families. This is some challenging kids have gone through the cadets as well. And that's particularly pleasing for me to see.
Good. Any further questions? Councillor Todd Jones.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Commissioner, I wonder if you can just say a little bit more about the Business Coordination Board, which is referenced in 4.3 of the report. And I suppose the context for this partly is working with businesses in the high street in terms of preventing retail crime. And I'm thinking of the additional resources that came from government over the summer to police our high streets. And I just wondered how that all fits in and how that works with the Business Coordination Board across all the cities and towns in our region.
Actually, the Business Coordination Board actually is a bit misleading. I inherited the name of that board. It's got nothing to do with business, as in businesses. This is the formal holding to the Chief Constable account meeting that I have, which is which the papers are in the public domain. Yeah, it is. I actually think we probably should change the name. So that is a formal meeting where I hold the Chief Constable to account. So they'll provide reports, and that's holding to account. Just a slight correction. In relation to tackling business crime on our high streets and extra funding, we didn't get any extra funding. That's the whole point. There is an awful lot going on in that space. I'm also passionate about doing the very best we can in relation to protecting and helping our businesses flourish. There has been work that's gone on. I've seen it's been a couple of operations. I think we've come back. We've been and presented to this panel before. So I don't have all the information in front of me, but there is some work. And I know against a national backdrop, particularly around shoplifting, we've seen significant increases across the country. Some of that hopefully is increased reporting, but I know it's not all increased reporting. There's a whole host of reasons. But for me, what is significant as well, it's not just the prevention stuff, which in fact draws us nicely back to the CSPs, community safety partnerships. A lot of those have done some work in this space. I know my hometown in East Cambs, they did a lot around preventing shoplifting and crimes against businesses, for example, tool marking, paid for by the community's fund as well. So there is quite a bit going on there. We have reported to this panel before, and if we can dig out a report, and I can send that to you.
And then perhaps we ought to change the way the Business Coordination Board is described to make it quite clear. The other point is, I was invited to the additional patrols that accompanied the police in Cambridge City Centre over the summer, specifically this summer sort of project to keep our high streets safe. So that additional resource was there in Cambridge.
Hotspot policing was funded. Yet there was additional resource put in by the constabulary because this is a government priority. So this isn't, we haven't got extra people to do it. I mean, there is actually extra people coming through the neighbourhood pledge. So this is about local neighbourhood policing. But last summer, or the summer just gone, we did not get additional funding from government to do that. Despite it. Right, and I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Whelan, could you just turn your mic off for me, please? It's giving a bit of feedback, I think. Councillor McNally.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. This is a bit of a fastball for the police commissioner, but it's growing really prevalent. Antisocial behaviour in my ward. I've just come back off my ward today, and the growing number of nitrous oxide canisters that I come across is horrendous. Over the last 2 weeks, I must have over 200 gas bottles stored at my house at the moment, ready for disposal in the correct way. Is anybody else having this same problem through their councils and their wards?
Maybe an operation question.
Yeah, just a couple of things on that. There is new legislation now, because before there was no legislation in relation to nitrous oxide. There is now, and it was the last government who brought that in. So it's now, criminal offence, potentially to possess, distribute, all that sort of stuff. I have actually funded initiatives around this before. Speak to your community safety partnership. We can put you in touch. I mean, if there is something that could be done there, then I'm very happy to help if we can.
Thank you very much. Any further questions on this agenda item?
Just to remember, we're all struggling to look at our microphones. Actually, it says on your microphone, when it says speak, your light's on, and when it says...
Thank you. That might help them both. Do me. Okay, thank you very much. The recommendations then are contained within the report. Are members in agreement to accept those? Yes. Thank you very much, Commissioner, and your team for that very comprehensive report. So we will move on now to the second item, which is the Police and Crime Commissioner's Delivery Plan update. Commissioner, would you like to present this item?
Thank you, Chair. I'll probably go through this at some pace, because I think we've dealt with quite a lot of the things, either by questions or in relation to the prevention. So I think some of the highlights, visible policing hours. Mentioned before, I know that our communities, visible policing, really important. I agree with it. However, Bobby's walking up and down the street doesn't necessarily make us safe. So I think it's really clear, from my perspective from a commissioner, this isn't about having, lots of promises are made around visible policing, police stations and things like that for political reasons. I hopefully, and as you know me, won't do this for political reasons. It's about keeping people safe. So, we were grateful for example, the £1 million Hotspot Action Fund. Lots of work. We talked about that already. The Force's commitment to the neighbourhood guarantee. So we did this recently. So this was the government announcement in relation to local neighbourhood policing. One of those is in relation to having named officers and response times to the public. I don't think we're quite there yet, but a lot of work has been done. And actually, I think that's good. I will say this, I think there's some good stuff there as well. I've often said of policing, and one of the complaints that I get quite often when attending community meetings is we don't know who our local police officer is and how do we contact them. Well, certainly before I came in, it was a case that even as a local councillor, you couldn't really contact the police without going through 101. And the point I was trying to make to the constabulary and the chief constable was, well, these local councillors in particular, they might, this isn't 101 matter. They just want to discuss a issue which they might be able to help with because they've got all the intelligence. It came back that, but what might happen is that they'll contact it and it should have been a 101 and it should have been this, a bit of risk adversity. So that changed. And I think this is moving us in a better place as well, so we can have that direct contact with our local police in teams. As Nikki's just pointed out as well. I mean, the simple fact is there has been a real uplift in demand on policing. I don't think we really know why that is, but that's across the country as well. So there is more for policing to do. So preventative interventions, not going to spend much time on this. Talked about the serious violence funding, anti-attached youth work. I've talked about preventing violence against women and girls. So tackling crime and antisocial behaviour. We talked about antisocial behaviour. I want to be clear because we talked about you going out and patrolling Cambridge city centre, which is excellent. But there's also obviously a massive rural community here. It won't be lost on many colleagues that we had some significant incident back in January. You may have seen through social media that there were 43 arrests, and actually for the past 2 weeks we've had them going through court. So, although I think it was a pretty poor response back in January, there's no doubt that a lot of hard work and resource have been put into bringing those offenders, those people to justice, and it's now for the courts to decide as well. And as part of that, I continue to fund Countryside Watch. I've also championed the public concerns and supported our CSPs. I talked about that to address local issues, and I will continue to do that. There's lots in the paper. There are some examples of some of the work that they've been doing there, and particularly, I think, remind me of the Fenland. They won an award recently for some of the brilliant sort of work, the youth work they're doing there. So that's the County Council, Fenland District Council, along with partners like the police. And they won a national, I think it was an LGA award, or certainly a big award that they won recently, showing that the innovation that they were carrying out there as well. Improved road safety in partnerships. We often talk about road safety at this panel and elsewhere. I will continue to invest in this area. We do have a new casualty reduction officer. So this is a police officer whose sole job is around casualty reduction. That will include going into schools. The speed watch schemes, continue to fund them. In fact, some time ago, Councillor Warren, I think I went out with you and did one of those, didn't I? So we continue to do those. One of the issues, once again, this is a volunteer based thing, and we are reliant on our fantastic volunteers to do that. We also have a road safety partnership. Some may be aware of it, as known as Vision Zero. I will be chairing that going forward, and that will be all the partners coming together to look at the best possible ways we can to reduce casualties on our roads here in Cambridge and Peterborough, where we have, frankly, too many. Survivor and victim engagement. As part of my commitment to create new opportunity to listen to the views of victims and witnesses, we're working with survivors of sexual violence to capture their experience, and the outcome of this will be a report, not a report, but an innovative visual representation. So that's work that Nikki and the team are doing there as well. Commissioning, we currently have a tender live for our specialist domestic abuse support service. I think we're doing really well in our county around the domestic abuse services and, of course, the sexual abuse services as well. I think we're punching above our weight. And then highlights around building trust and confidence. Won't be lost on members who were here for our last meeting. We do have a new Chief Constable starting with us very soon, in Friday, I think. Trust and confidence very much was part of that interview process. He knows that, he gets that, and I'll be holding him to account to ensure that he does all he can in relation to the constabulary. And I think, Chair, I will leave it at that. There's lots more in the report, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Just a reminder, questions need to be strategic and relevant to the information in front of you as opposed to operational. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you very much for your report. And I apologise, the thing I raised earlier on was actually in this report, not the other one which you twigged. But, thank you. I just wanted to come back on the improving road safety in partnership, and I think this is really important. And I just wanted to understand, just step to one side a moment. A lot of us as county councillors spend a lot of time reporting damaged highways, street furniture, signage and things that have been knocked over. I have become, it seems there seems to have been a spate of almost deliberate driving into bits of street furniture, almost like a dare in my local village with the amount that I've had to report. And I just wondered, are you aware of a sort of general increase in the amount of dangerous driving at speed, almost reckless, using them almost like a stock car? Are you aware of that at all?
So I don't think we've seen a pattern. I'm aware of your particular issues, and I know my chief executive has taken them up with the chief constable, so hopefully we get some sort of response. But I mean, part of this board is monitoring the data, particularly around where things are happening. And as you probably pointed out there, quite often we'll all hear this. It's about speeding. People are concerned about speeding. I point out, yeah, we should be concerned about speeding, but the thing we've got to be concerned about is road safety, being safe on our roads, and speeding is obviously a contributor to making us unsafe on our roads. So, in answer to your direct question, I'm not aware that we've seen anything sort of strategically in relation to that. But those are the sort of things that we'll be monitoring in relation to road safety moving forward.
Do we have access to any of that data ourselves as councillors?
Yeah, I'll take that away and ask the question. There are dashboards, there is data. I don't see why any of that shouldn't be in the public domain or in the domain of this. Would probably be my decision because I'm chairing the board. So I will take that away and have a conversation with partners.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Tong.
Firstly, I would like to compliment something on I can't see the page number actually, page 33 of the document pack, which is to do with the work engaging with the deaf community. I used to work with deaf children and my mum is deaf, and I really see how often the deaf community and deaf people in general kind of get forgotten about. So I think this work is really, really good, and it's just fantastic to see. To go on to my question then, which I am also going to ask about the improving road safety section, I wanted to ask a bit more information about the targeted communications campaign, specifically who is being targeted. Anecdotally in Cambridge, I see the majority of antisocial motorcycling coming from courier drivers, courier deliverers of things like fast food. And I think well, bluntly, I think these riders are pressured to ride and get about dangerously because they don't earn a lot. They've got to make ends meet, so they have to do things as fast as possible. And it's really disappointing to see a lack of oversight from these companies that are hiring these riders who are, who are putting this sort of pressure on them. So that's the question, was who is being targeted? And to expand on that, has there been any outreach work when it comes to trying to look into the restaurants and other services that are hiring these riders who are doing this antisocial riding?
In relation to the last point, I don't know the answer to that, whether that has happened. I suspect not, but certainly it's one that I can take back. So I completely understand when we talk about lorry drivers and things. It's often talking to the companies. I mean, we've seen that across the county. East Cambridgeshire, a good example. You've got some villages which were being used by heavy goods vehicles, probably wasn't appropriate. But when you engage with the actual companies, then often you can come to some agreement. I'll look into that. So the sort of things I know off the top of my head. There's been some campaigns around motorcyclists. We have seen, shockingly and sadly, a steep rise in fatalities to do with motorcycles. So there has been some work there. Another one I'm aware of is older drivers. And that's an interesting one, actually. Because I'm getting to be an older driver, and I asked for some data around this before. There is some work now, and in fact, actually, most older drivers we've seen from research will self-police, for want of a better word. So actually, if we think that older drivers are more dangerous, actually the stats show that they're not, because they will drive more safely. But there is some work that's been done there as well. Yes, and there was some fantastic work done by our in police team. That's our special constabulary, actually, where one of them is a gamekeeper and an ex-farmer, etc. But there was a lot of data showing, and we probably shouldn't be surprised, but in Cambridgeshire we had a significant amount of agricultural machinery road traffic collisions, and when they happen, they're not good. And actually, this was about getting farmers, particularly young farmers, and bit of shock and awe, really, telling them, well, this is what can happen. Now, this is not me saying that young farmers or farmers drive dangerously, but you know, you can drive one of that, what's a 35-ton tractor at the age of 16 on a public road. Are we equipping our young people to be able to do that and to do that safely? It's unfortunate as well. We've seen an increase in drug use amongst people in the agricultural machinery. You know, long hours, long nights, and of course the two don't go together. So, you know, rather than trying to tackle this from a enforcement point of view, they've gone out and a really good engagement. Actually, I went out with them to one of them, and it was one of our gamekeepers sort of events. They went out and spoke to them, and really good engagement. And I think people are listening. So that's just some of the examples. There are more.
Thank you. Any further questions? That's all again.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask a question on the neighbourhood policing guarantee. Very welcome and completely happy with the proposals on having the named police officer and responding to all issues within 72 hours. I just wanted to ask, do we have sufficient resource to actually cover this? I ask this because I know my local named police officer, he is the only neighbourhood officer for the area, and he says quite often he ends up being called to other areas because that's the operational need. If response need him, he has to go to response, which I understand. But my concern is that kind of stretch in the system will affect the ability to deliver this pledge. So could you give me some assurance on that, please?
I can't absolutely give you assurance, no. We are one of the poorest funded police forces in the country. We continue to make that point collectively. You know, this isn't political. This is governments that have gone by time and time again. I don't see that changing either, which puts me in an awful position when it comes to precept and raising, and this panel. You know, nobody wants to increase taxes, but I will say now that, you know, we will come round and I will be coming to this panel, and it's the last thing I want to do, but not just, you know, well, politically as well, last thing I want to do, but I have absolutely no choice, because if I don't, you will lose police officers. What I think is a positive is that the constabulary is well managed financially. There are a number of forces in serious and significant trouble financially. We are not, but that could change. There are some real demands and real demands coming up on us. And I mentioned earlier, the demand for policing services has risen. You know, so they're doing more with the same. And of course, you know, we do the maths, that's difficult. So this is a job for the new chief constable, which I'll be holding to account, is to try and work through that and work through those resources. He gets, as I do, the significance of local neighbourhood policing. I would add this, because I go to lots of community meetings. I hear that time and time again. Our police officers, quite rightly, being honest with the public and saying that it's only me and I'm always being taken off. Sometimes there's a little bit of exaggeration there. And also, this isn't just about your local policing. We all know, I'm not saying something you don't know, but of course that local policing, that local neighbourhood guarantee, etc., get that. We want to support that. But for me, it's about keeping people safe. And behind that neighbourhood policing team, there are a raft of other policing services that are keeping you safe that you do not see. Our detectives and our sexual investigation teams, our counter-terrorism officers, I could go on, and our forensics officers, all people that you won't see on a day-to-day basis, but are equally required, and in some case, well, equally required for that policing system to work and keep us safe.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, thank you for the answer. Obviously, I appreciate the constraints we have on resource, and I know you're doing the best you can to make the case for those extra resources. I just wanted to pay tribute to the neighbourhood officers, because they are doing a much better job now of engaging with the community, holding meetings. I know you've attended some of them as well. So that really is appreciated. Just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. Following on from what Councillor Wiggin was asking and your response, one of the things often think when I'm in committees at county and indeed here and at the combined authority is that the argument for us getting more money relates to the number of people living here. So often I'm saying, well, hang on, what is it per head of population? And the current government is asking us to build lots more houses, and we are already doing that. But this is increasing the population in around Cambridge and in Cambridgeshire and in Peterborough, and this is an argument that you need to be using to leverage money from the central government, because fields and buildings don't create crime, it's people. And so the more people we have in Cambridgeshire living here comfortably in housing that we hope to deliver, the more crime there will be. And I'm just wondering whether you have all of that information available to you to leverage your argument.
So it's a really good point, well made. It's actually worse than that, on account of the fact that the government, in the last government, but I suppose it's a bit newer now, but the data that the government use in relation to the policing grant goes back to not the last census, the census before. And guess what? In Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, we've had at least a 10% growth in people. So when I said we are one of the lowest funded forces, and others will say, well, it's us. Look, I'm saying, but they're not taking into account the fact that we got 10% more people than what the government actually thought we had or are using. That is shocking. I happen to know that a couple of our MPs have had this conversation with the policing minister and former policing minister and Home Secretary. This would be easy to solve. The rest of the funding formula would be more difficult because you're going to get winners and losers. I recognise that. And actually, I recognise that places like London, Birmingham, Liverpool, great, fantastic places that they are, require more police resources. I get that. That's good for us in Cambridgeshire as well, because our crime comes from those areas. But actually, just to plug in the numbers, surely that's the fair thing to do. But they're not doing it, and I do not understand why. The problem is that I can speak, and a couple of other PCCs can speak, but others that think they might lose. So here's an example: Wales. I am going to mention names. Wales. Most of their forces they've got less population. So once that they're actually much better off. But here in Cambridgeshire, we're not. I continue to make the case. Our members of Parliament. Maybe this is an ask of you, because you obviously are on the political grounds as well. I have a good relationship with all our MPs, I think, but lobby on this point and get our MPs to come together and speak for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. This is just an unfairness, a real unfairness, and it's it needs addressing.
We fully support you. Any further questions on this agenda item? Councillor Warren.
So with my one, it's all about the contacting the police. Obviously, it's nice to see that the average human waiting times are coming down, and that is the focus of performance of the Commissioner's business report. But what about the quality of the calls that we're receiving? Because I've had quite a few residents who said, well, we've run 999, but we didn't feel that we were heard in our situation. So what kind of focused data are we looking at with the quality of the calls that are coming through and being responded to on 999? Are you getting reports to Commissioner's Board?
Actually, that's a really good point. It's all well and good picking up the phone and answering quickly and getting to places quickly, and as the last chief said as well, it's about what you actually do with that and providing a good service. So I do know tactically on a couple of areas. So, for example, one of the complaints we had was following that air course is that people were phoning up and people in the control room just didn't, they didn't understand the severity of it. They thought these were people chasing rabbits around fields, and they just didn't understand the severity of it. So there's been additional training gone in by our rural crime team. My question to the chief will be, well, why didn't that happen anyway? We're a rural county, but moving forward, that will be addressed. In relation to, they receive, particularly those people answering the 999 calls will be receiving, the training. But I will take that away if I'm holding to account, because I think it's a good question. Do we have any data which it's a bit more difficult to quantify that actually. But is there anything that can show that we're actually providing a better service other than getting less complaints? I think is probably one of the thing. But I will take that away and have a think about it.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, Councillor Todd Jones?
Thanks, Commissioner. Tackling crime in rural areas. Can I just ask a question about? It sounds like it was a really good operation, by the way, back earlier in the year. But my understanding is that the systems with which the police different forces need to communicate with each other. I'm talking about the databases, more technical systems, is still needs a bit of coordination and they're not always compatible. Am I right in that? So, for example, an example I was told about was a criminal act right in the very north of this county. The criminal was then going into Lincolnshire, but in terms of the police follow-up, difficulties in terms of the databases and the actual systems talking to each other to track that criminality and those crimes that have been committed and to try and follow up. Have I got that wrong, or is that still an issue between forces?
No, you haven't got that wrong. I think it's shocking that here we are in 2025 and some of those issues are still there. And I say that because one of the reasons that policing needs to ensure that it is sharing information. But there are a number of reasons for it. And they do. At a strategic level, there is the Police National Law Enforcement Database, which all forces go into. So, this isn't the case that police do not share information. We have national systems that work. But what we don't have is that day-to-day sort of interaction. Radios, we can talk to each other, no problem. But you're right, Lincolnshire operates a different crime management system or case management system to the 7 forces of the Eastern region. So Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire, Cambridgeshire, Norfolk, Suffolk, we're all in the same system. That was the reason we were able to work with the CPS to come up with the way that we deal with hair coursing, for example, and giving out warnings, because we knew they were giving the warning because we were on the same system. I am a board director of Police Digital Service. I've had a keen interest in this area for some time. And one of them was because of the terrible, awful events that happened in Soham, because it was part of the Bishard inquiry. The first 10 to 20 recommendations were all about police use of IT. Police has come a long way, but it still hasn't implemented all those recommendations. And it's difficult, to do because we're not in a good starting position. I will continue to bang the drum that policing needs to collaborate, come together and share where we can. That's why I sit on that board and I'm very clear about that in Cambridgeshire. We will join other forces and collaborate in those sort of areas wherever we can for the greater good of policing.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? Okay, well, the recommendations are within the report and members are in agreement? Yes? Thank you very much. Okay, we're now moving on to the final agenda item, which is around the forward plan then for work with the panel. Nikki, I understand, I think you're probably going to stay for this item, but if the Commission and the rest of your team so are ready to leave, thank you very much for your attendance and for all the hard work that goes in the background to actually be able to present this information like you have this afternoon. Thank you. Thank you very much. So members you have on page 35 of your agenda pack, you have the work programme. You've had an opportunity to have a look at this. Is there anything that anybody wishes to add? Any questions?
I wondered if we might, given the answers that we've had to our questions today, quite a lot of people have raised issues to do with speeding and vehicle crime. I certainly did. Just wondered whether we wanted some kind of report on how that's going, whether they feel they have the resources, whether they feel they have sufficient support, sufficient information, sufficient vehicles to tackle vehicles speeding and antisocial driving and that sort of thing. Just a thought.
I don't know whether
Other
that's
people.
what your view would be in terms of whether that's an operational. It's certainly straying into operational, but
No, yours is
no,
on.
it was on for a second. Excellent. It depends which angle you're going from, because obviously we've got a deep dive coming up at a future panel, which does, and road safety sits within that tackling crime and antisocial behaviour deep dive. So we could look to answer some of the questions in a scheduled paper. If it's linked to road safety, or are you referenced?
Is that the one in March, tackling crime? Okay. Right.
And
Okay, no,
that-
that's fine. Link it with that.
That probably would be helpful as well, because as the Commissioner referenced, we've got the first Vision Zero board next week that he's chairing. So it gives some of that work to go into train. So if you think we'll be preparing the paper in February, so we should have been able to have 2 of those boards. It would be really helpful if you have thoughts of things we definitely want to have covered at that paper, that members attend the panel briefing, the pre-briefing, because that gives us chance to make sure that we're answering the questions in the papers that you would like to see answering, rather than we bring a paper that doesn't address the things you'd like to see. Yeah, I was just going to reiterate that attendance at those briefings is really important, but also really useful, because that's exactly the right arena for that kind of question to then shape the information you're providing with us at a meeting.
And in amongst that, it's slightly tricky, this one, but illegal electric scooters and bikes. Because they're so fast, they're silent. We've got the void trial, which are the legal e-scooters and bikes, but we've got a lot of not legal scooters and bikes buzzing around, and because because you don't register, people are just buying them. Their motors can be modified to make them go much faster. And I suspect some of the delivery, people, you were talking like, was it you talking about delivery drivers? No, it was you. That's right. I think some of those delivery drivers are using that kind of illegal, hyped up bike, and I just wondered whether we can think about, because it's so difficult because they're not registered. Is there a way that we can ask the police crime commissioner to address that, because it's such a worry?
What we'll need to do is make sure we can get that information from the constabulary in advance of the paper, because it's not something we can just answer. So can I just clarify, are you asking for what the operational response is to e-scooters, or are you asking about what partnership working is ongoing through the Vision Zero board? Both. Okay. Yeah, we need to have a focus on the partnership working as opposed to the operational. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something we could ask for. We can ask for some information through our business coordination board, which means you'll be able to access the minutes from that meeting to see that, and also their papers. So it's something we can put on our agenda. Thank you. Anybody got? Sorry.
Thing. I think there's another element of this, and that is legislation. A part of the reason that it's not possible to do anything is that there isn't sufficient legislation for the police to take action against some of these illegal bikes, because they're considered to be motorbikes. They come under the same category, and of course motorbikes have licensed drivers driving them, whereas the e-bikes don't. They're just people using them. So I think there's another piece of work which is to do with general legislation.
And maybe some of those local issues need to go back to community safety partnerships, where that activity is actually taking place in localities. Anybody, anything else in relation to work plan? No? Okay, thank you very much. That concludes today's meeting then. Thank you. Nice to see so many people here. Next meeting is the 26th of November. And if I could just remind people of the dates for the next panel briefings, those are online. 22nd of October, 11 o'clock. And I think that's going to be looking at, will it be commissioning grants in preparation for the kind of for the budget meeting?
It will be commissioning and grants, and also our either third or fourth thematic pillar, which is supporting victims and witnesses. So historically we had a commissioning and grants paper, but didn't have victims and witnesses separately. But we've obviously separated them out now. So there'll be two there, yeah. And I think there's a budget and a constabulary budget paper as well.
Yeah, lovely. So as many people as possible at that would be absolutely brilliant, and it's a really good opportunity then to ask questions and actually shape the paper that comes before the November.
Just one thing to point out, that obviously when we bring those papers in November, we won't have had any budgets.
Yeah,
by then
we
either.
understand
So, particularly with commissioning and grants, it's going to be really it's an unusual timing to bring it, because we won't be getting budgets till later in the year. But what it can do is flag the strategic approach to commissioning and grants, and then also flag any risk areas to the panel.
Yeah, thank you.
There also be a briefing between the 26th of November and the 28th of January when we're looking at the precept? I'm only thinking because...
Yeah, there's a briefing.
Do we have a date?
14th of January.
Oh, lovely.
At 10 o'clock. Yeah, the members should have got invitations for all of them. If you haven't, let Pippa know, we'll resend. I also did send out after the July meeting, sent out a newsletter which has got all the dates, the meeting dates and the briefing dates, and everybody, I just thought I'll just put them on all in one place for you.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much then. Safe journey back wherever you're going. Please get your travel expenses in for Pippa. Thank you very much.